Hey, it's Mr. Luneski here, coming to you with your first geometry video for the year, talking about Pythagorean Theorem. This is probably going to be one of the most important things that you see throughout the year in geometry. So we're just going to hit you with it right from the beginning. We're going to use it a lot here. So what exactly is a Pythagorean Theorem? The Pythagorean Theorem states that the sum of the squares of the legs of any right triangle is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. And so one thing that you're going to learn about geometry is it's very vocabulary heavy. So we have some vocab words here. We have legs, we have right triangle, hypotenuse. So in order to understand this theorem, we need to understand what those words mean. Let's start with something easy that hopefully you guys remember or have heard before. A right triangle. A right triangle just means that one of the angles in the triangle is 90 degrees. 90 degrees is typically indicated with that little box right there. So looking at the triangle, when you see that little box inside of a triangle, that indicates that it's 90 degrees, that angle's measurement equals 90 degrees. So the legs of a right triangle are the two sides of the triangle that create the 90-degree angle. So we can say that A and B here are the legs. And then the hypotenuse is always the longest side of a triangle, of a right triangle, excuse me, and it's always across. So wherever your little box is, if you draw an arrow, almost like you're shooting a bow and arrow or something, it kind of goes across and hits the hypotenuse. So side C is typically labeled as our hypotenuse. So the equation for a Pythagorean theorem that we're going to use is c squared equals a squared plus b squared, where c represents the hypotenuse and a and b represent the legs. We use this theorem typically to find the third side or find a missing side of a right triangle. So here's a perfect example here. If we have this right triangle and I asked you to solve for x, we basically can substitute this into Pythagorean theorem. So the idea here is that you always want to find the hypotenuse first. So I'll just say find the hypotenuse first. Now when I say find the hypotenuse, I just mean to locate it. So which of these things is the hypotenuse? Well, there's my right angle, draw an arrow across, this is my hypotenuse. So now I can substitute x in for c, because that's my hypotenuse. So I would say x squared equals, and then my legs are 8 and 6. The order is not important on the legs. So you could have said 6 squared plus 8 squared, or you could have said 8 squared plus 6 squared. And now we just sort of simplify and solve this. So x squared stays the same, 6 squared becomes 36, 8 squared becomes 64. So remember, this means 8 times 8, 6 times 6. And when we add all of this together, we get 100. But now we don't want to know what x squared is, we want to know what x is. So remember, to undo something that is squared, we have to square root both sides. And so the square root of 100 is 10, and that would be your answer. So as you're going to see here in a bit, when you solve problems with right triangles, we're not always going to be solving for the hypotenuse. Sometimes we'll solve for a leg. Alrighty, thank you for watching.